Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's 3:31 p.m. I'm calling this meeting of the Maple Broadband Executive Committee to order for December 5th, 2024. First up is to approve the agenda. So you've all had a chance to review the agenda, and I'll entertain a motion to approve. Moved by Nancy. Can I get a second? Second from Shannon. Would anyone like to make any changes to the agenda? Okay. Hearing none, all in favor of the approving the agenda as distributed, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
All right, we have an agenda. Next up is approval of the minutes from November 21st. I'll entertain a motion to approve those.
So
To
moved.
approve.
Okay. All right.
We'll give
Give
it to Jeff and I'll second.
Great. Thank you. All right. Any comments on the minutes, draft minutes? Okay. Hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes as distributed? Raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
All right. Great. The minutes have been approved. Welcome, Lynn.
Hey.
Next up is public comment. That's a very nice sweater. That's my public comment. Would anyone like to make another public comment? Okay. Hearing none. Oh dear, I should have swapped the order of the executive director and chair report. It got out of order. Anyway, I will go first because that's how it is on the agenda. I'll fix that going forward. So I think it's no surprise to anyone that my big focus right now is BEAD. The pre-proposal window has opened, and so I will cover the details of that when we get to the BEAD part of the agenda later on. But doing that, as well as looking ahead to the full proposal, is obviously one of the things I've been doing. I've also been working with the London Middlebury team on the marketing plan and the year-end promo and a couple of other things related to that, and the annual report, and we need to do for this month. We need to do the grant reporting. So I've been working with Cy on that, and then I think the other big activity is we received a couple of weeks ago finally the CostQuest data sets that showed the updated availability as of the end of June 2024 was made available in electronic form. So I've been having quite a lot of work back and forth with Lucas, who is the GIS consultant, to get that into a form where I can use it and manipulate it. Hi, Steve. Question?
You said updated availability. Updated availability of what?
Service availability. So because in order to fulfill our universal service plan, we need to understand what is the current state of play. So where the service is and is not. So understanding as best we can from the available data where our competitors actually do and don't have what kind of network. And it's been a little bit interesting. It's surprised me because I've been under the impression that Fidium built out the entire Middlebury Wire Center with the exception of North New Haven, but it looks like they haven't. They've left off a bunch of chunks of Middlebury that I wasn't aware they'd left off. So that is interesting. Anyway, be that as it may, there's obviously still a lot which is up in the air in terms of what and when we are actually going to build next year. So I'm busy with that analysis now and making progress. I now finally, as of last night, I have a complete data set in the software that we're using that not only has this, but I've gone and drawn a number of polygons around the BEAD service areas so we can start to run calculations and figure out, because it's one thing to understand what are the different things we have to build, and the real work is to take all the different things that we could build and try and figure out in what order should we build and why and how much money it's going to cost and how do we fund all that, which is what I feel like I've been talking about for some time, but I now am almost ready to, I've now almost finished the GIS work and I'm going to be into the business modeling and planning work, which is the real fun part. So that's my other main activity. Oh, nice jacket, Steve. I didn't notice that either. Nice to see you representing. So, any comments, questions, concerns about any of that?
You're out of here in about 2 weeks.
3 weeks, I think. Isn't it 3 weeks until the Christmas week? I think there's 3
I looked
weeks.
at my calendar. You're out of office or on vacation between Christmas and New Year's. So if you assume you're not around that week, it's only 2 weeks.
Yep, you're right. 2 weeks. 2 weeks and 1 day. Guess I have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, that's it for me. So, Steve, you want to move on to the chair report?
Yeah, I was kind of ambivalent about whether I should do this or not, just because I know we do have a lot to cover, but I'll do a quick thing here. So it's really ever so brief. I keep reporting to the governing board and you that we're just days away from activating our Leicester hub, and we're pretty much able to take subscribers out of the Leicester hub now, but it's been, as you've heard Ellie and me in the past, it's been kind of challenging. We had Leicester, in order to be resilient, has to be connected back to WCBT at two diverse points. So about a week or two ago, we did get the connection up to Cornwall, and from there we can connect to both Weybridge and Bridport. And we encountered a stretch of cable that was installed but not spliced, and it turned out to be defective, pretty severely defective. It was about almost 2 miles of cable. And everybody, including Syracuse Utilities, responded, heroically to get resources down into this area. We picked up our last reel of 72 fiber cable that we have staged at in Waitsfield, and then a stretch of this route here was replaced with a new working cable. So pretty much we are diverse and resilient, which means if this goes bad, this fiber run from here to Orwell goes bad, we still have service out of Leicester, and the same thing applies from the Leicester to Cornwall. If the cable is severed here, we can get connectivity up to Orwell. And so just wanted you to see that, and I'm probably going to share this with the governing board next week. And then this may beg the question of what the North Territory. We've ended up calling our two pieces of real estate as the North and South Territory. North Territory is, as you well are aware, Virgins and some Ferrisburg and some New Haven and other towns, and they're all served out of a single building that's in Virgins, and we have cable running from Virgins to both Bridport and Charlotte. So the same resiliency applies here, where if this cable is cut, service to our subscribers will come from Bridport, and if this piece is cut, then the service will be delivered via Charlotte. So just to let you know, that's where we are now. There is work yet to do that I think Ellie can probably be better able to expand on, perhaps when the time comes. But I guess the good news from our perspective is this was a big hurdle for us to get this done. It's all the big building blocks of our network that we planned to do this year are essentially done. Again, with the caveat that we do have kind of peripheral work in certain areas that'll keep us entertained for a while. Any questions? Okay, that's it for me, Ellie.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. So on to updates. So the first item on our updates is BEAD. So in the pre-proposal phase, just to recap, what we need to do at this phase, or anyone needs to do at this phase, is to indicate for each project area that they intend to submit a full bid. So to say that they intend to bid, and if they intend to submit a priority broadband project, which is fiber only, or a non-priority broadband project, which is mixed fiber and other technologies. And a couple of things about the entity which is submitting. And a kind of indicative budget. It's not meant to be a bid, but it's meant to be just a kind of indicative budget. And then the final thing, which is where Steve and I have been spending a lot of time and have been working with Waitsfield as well to help them, is that at this stage we are allowed to request modifications to the project area. So our project area, where Maple Broadband is, of course, planning to bid, is our communications union district. And so you might think, well, why are we planning to modify our communications union district? Because that's our territory. And the answer is that if you recall from the NTIA's challenge process, we were allowed to challenge whether or not service was available at a given address, but there was no point in the process where we were allowed to challenge the validity of an actual thing on the map, which was listed as requiring service. And so as a result, Steve and I have gone through and found, was it 39, 40, something like that. I think we found 40 discrete locations that are either trailheads or barns or empty fields or what used to be a barn and has since been demolished, things like that. And so we are going to be submitting as part of the pre-proposal phase, here's the list of locations that we want removed from our district, and here's the rationale. And the way that the process works is that this was clarified in the BEAD's request for applications, is that because again, the list of locations is not something that the VCBB has complete discretion over. That list came from the federal government, from the FCC, and the NTIA says you must use this list. And so basically the process to get bogus things removed is that we need to identify the things we want removed. We need to go through the process of challenging them formally on the FCC map to show that we're serious and we're not just making things up. And then we need to we need to provide that same evidence to the VCBB. So essentially, we're going to be submitting our evidence that this is a barn, this is a trailhead, this is a bridge, this is an empty field to the FCC and to the VCBB at the same time. And what happens after that is that the VCBB will be reviewing our requests, doing their adjudication, and then either accepting or rejecting the modifications to the service area from all applicants. Because again, we don't know, there could be other applicants in the service territory, and we don't know if there are and what things they might put in. So ultimately, the VCB has final discretion on what they do or don't do with this, but hopefully sanity prevails, and things that are not legitimate broadband serviceable locations will be adjudicated out by the VCBB. What happens on the FCC side actually doesn't matter. That was one of the questions we asked actually another CUD asked in the Q&A last week. And basically they said, we don't really care what the FCC does after that. I mean, if you submit good evidence, they'll probably reach the same conclusion that we do. But it takes them so long to adjudicate that we're not going to sit around waiting for 3 and 6 and 9 months for them to figure it out and then update their fabric, because we have to move forward. And this is the process that the NTIA has allowed. So Steve and I have been doing that. I think we've probably done, I don't know, we've done a lot of it. So we're going through and identifying what they are and why is a big chunk of work. Jeff's got his hand up. And then Steve has been collecting screenshots of evidence. And then I think the next phase is Steve is going to be going and doing field trips out to these locations to collect photographs, and I'm going to be doing write-ups. Jeff, question, comment?
It sounds like an awful lot of effort to knock things out rather than, that effort going to productive purpose. What happens if we don't challenge a trailhead? What does that mean?
That means that we need to provide, it means that we need to submit a BEAD bid for all of the addresses that they say we need to provide access to. And I think as part of the process later, we're going to be asked to provide information like where's our high-level design and where's our business case and so on. So it would be difficult for us not to challenge them, because then at a later stage, we essentially need to promise and agree in a grant that we're going to provide service to them and then not do it. So,
but are these areas we'd be going by anyway? In other words, are we really adding to our scope by not challenging?
There are a handful of them that we're going by anyway that we're challenging just because it's not hard to add 1 or 2. I mean, there's like 2 barns right along an area that we have service, but for the most part, these are things that are way off the beaten track. And the thing with BEAD, as you recall, is that you need to, it's not just a main line, you need to also provide the drop facility essentially, because you need to be able to have everyone installed within 10 days at nothing more than your additional service fee. And you might think, well, why an empty field is never going to order service, and so you don't need to
Right.
run a drop there. But at the same time, when it gets into the details of the actual application, it's just easier not to have it there than to explain why you have a zero
Okay.
cost for this location that's in the middle of the field. And
Okay.
also, by the way, it could well be the case that some of these things look like they're nothing on an aerial photograph, and in the meantime, something has actually happened. So the ones that are that are off the beaten track, that are along routes we're building, I think it makes sense to go and put eyes on them physically to see. And then the other ones, you just want to make 100% sure. I mean, there are a couple, like for example, there's some hunting camps up in Ripton that we've talked about before. There's some, I think, camps or cabins or something like that in New Haven that requires a mile of buried work to get to. And that's a pretty expensive thing to be doing if you don't actually need to provide service there. So.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, but I completely agree with you, and I'm sort of having a giggle because your comment your comment resembles those
I'll
of Ted Cruz.
stay in line. I'm quiet now. Stop it, Jeff. Okay.
You're absolutely right. The process is pretty Kafkaesque and has a lot of red tape, but that's the NTIA under the current administration. So, and I suppose the other thing, since we're talking about that now, is again, there's lots of speculation amongst the chattering classes about what might happen under the next administration. It seems to be the case that there's a general consensus that probably the program is not going to go away, and probably it's not all going to get redirected to Starlink. And what is likely to happen is that some of the rules around, I don't know about what is and is not a valid location, but some of the rules, like for example, around the NEPA reviews for environmental permitting and some of the workforce development and environmental resilience requirements are probably likely to go away. It's unclear whether or not states will have the ability then to continue to require them, which if they do, Vermont will probably continue to require any of the things that Vermont requires now, with the possible exception of the long red tape federal government requirements like NEPA. But again, this is really all speculation at this point, and like I said before, we're proceeding based on the rules as we currently understand them, which say no change. So that's BEAD. Any comments, questions on BEAD?
You used the word sanity in there, but you misspoke, I think. Did you?
Sanity?
You mentioned sanity as
talking about the VCBB or the incoming administration. Yes, well,
I'm sure you'll reconsider.
I won't comment until I have something substantive to comment on.
Okay.
How's that? Okay, so operations. I think Steve has covered quite a bit of that under the chair report. He put in the chat the active subscribers 486. We've had a couple of installs. We've had a couple of permanent disconnects, some of which again come back up again when they realize we're serious that we'll turn them off if they don't pay. And there's a number that are waiting in the wings. I think there's 5 in the next week that are already scheduled, and there's a handful that are in the area that's going to be turned up soon. So maybe we'll get to 500 by the end of the year. It would be nice. But we'll see. Anything else you think we should raise under operations, Steve, from your perspective?
The other thing that's kind of happening in the background for if and when we are awarded BEAD, we also plan on building out Middlebury and Ripton, and Ellie and I are sitting on our hands about that one because we put everything in play that we could. We have detail out to the school system for a location in Middlebury and in Ripton. It sounds promising, and I think the reason for delay is that, first of all, for Middlebury, they want to see what the easement document looks like. So we worked with Karen Totecki, who cooked up a easement for us, and that's been sent on to the folks that are handling the easement for Middlebury. And then we've done some changes, some optional approaches towards configuring a hub in Ripton and shared that with the school district. And all those things that we handed to them are now awaiting their disposition. And I think what we got, the one that's kind of the most concerning for me, because it's going to be where we place our central hub, is Middlebury. And I think what I read is it's like the 26th or 28th of December when the school board will listen to what the presentation is, and it's really not Ellie or me to attend. Apparently it happens outside of our involvement, and then hopefully they'll approve or deny, et cetera, et cetera. But right now, I think we're assuming that we'll be successful with both of those, and that's just one more task to get out of the way. There's still time to negotiate easements and things like that, and lots of planning we can do, but still, it's progress. So it's kind of one of the few things that relates to construction next year that's getting a lot of our time, besides all the bead stuff that Ellie's doing.
Yep.
That's it.
Okay. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move on. I don't think I have anything else under other updates. So under number 7, audit updates, Sai is not here, so I will give the update. So we've sent off everything to Bonnie. We believe that we're done. We want to have a call with her to align on to make sure that she understands the rationale for the asset capitalization and the asset capitalization dates. I think based on some of the emails that I've seen back and forth that she does get it, but we just need to make sure that we're aligned in all the details to try and reduce the back and forth. So we're trying to set up a call between ourselves and just aligning schedules. So hopefully that'll happen early next week. Yes.
I'm wondering about the fact that sorting out any open items related to the audit might best be accomplished before you go away for a while. Is that a reasonable expectation, or if you think is there any reason we need to work with you and Lynn and Cy and Bonnie to make sure that any unanswered questions are addressed while you're still available to answer them, or is that overthinking it?
But that's literally what we're trying to do by having a call, to make sure that Bonnie can ask anything live and we can get her questions answered and she can have what she needs to go off and do her thing, because she's going on vacation in the middle of the month, which is even sooner than what I'm leaving. So we would ideally really like her to be done and wrapped up and have submitted the audit by then. Whether that's realistic, I don't know, but at least we want to make sure that we give her all of the information before she goes on vacation so that she can come back in January, worst case, and get through it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that you and I have talked about with your being away is it's not like you're unresponsive. It just means if we need your attention, we need to take into account the time shift and your other activities. So it's not like you're absolutely falling off the face of the map.
Yeah,
that's close.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It's not outer Mongolia. It's just Cape Town. Okay. Anything else on that? Okay. So the FY 2025 budget and annual report. So I sent out the draft annual report let's start with that one. I sent that out a couple of days ago. I got some feedback from Nancy, and I got some feedback from Ross Conrad. I sent it on to Waitsfield. Got some feedback from Kurt, all of which has been consolidated and sent to London Middlebury. So this, on the annual report, this is a last call for any comments or suggestions before they incorporate things and work on a draft that'll go out in the board pack to the governing board tomorrow. That'll hopefully be the final one. Steve.
Yeah, the one thing that caught my eye was that map that I know we've been waiting a long time for, and I think you captured something in your notice, your comments, that the distinction between different line colors is a little hard to distinguish. Also, it occurred to me, and I don't know what kind of a document the map is, but and I know that one of my ongoing concerns is to try to make sure that somebody who wants to do sabotage doesn't know where all our fiber is located. I think the map is pretty effective in making it that very, very difficult to discern. But something else we could do that might help with comprehension would increase the line width. It's like 1 point right now or half a point. I don't know whether it's a vector graphics document or what is being used there, but if possible, there would be no harm in making those lines a little bit thicker across the board, which would then make it easier to catch what color is each line and whatnot.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. So, Nancy had also put some good comments in there about it would be good to put the town lines just so that people could better orient themselves. And so there was some very good feedback we had on the map.
I had 2 items, if I may.
Please.
One was there's a picture of a bucket truck doing install. This is just a nit. Should that license plate be blurred?
Probably not a bad idea.
Okay. And more substantive, on page 5 under 2024 accomplishments, we describe our great accomplishments. I know we're serving Virgins, and maybe it doesn't fall within how these sentences are constructed, but there's no mention, and I'm just wondering about that.
This is on page 5 where we're talking about I'm going to share my screen.
It was the page that's entitled.
Yep.
Huh. Maybe it's the next page. Yep.
Oh, this one.
This page, yes.
Oh, this is the Waitsfield page. This is talking about where they're serving.
Oh. Okay, sorry, was not clear to me.
Well, but that's a great point, because if it wasn't clear to you, it may not be clear to others as well. Maybe we should put their logo like on this page, or because like I mean, this does. One of my comments is that this I didn't really notice these things, and then if you don't know what this acronym is, I want to spell it out. But that's a good point. We should try and maybe make it even more clear that this is a WCBT page.
But I guess I'm a little confused, because when we say it's a WCVT page, the communities that are listed are being served by well, maybe it's just Waltham specific.
Yes, they do have a network in part of Waltham. For the most part, we don't.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, for the most part, the towns don't overlap, but some of them do.
Okay, that's my confusion. Okay.
Yeah, I think Waltham, New Haven, Moncton,
Okay.
and Ferrisburg are the overlaps.
Okay. Never mind. That's the end. Thank you.
Okay, great. So the next thing then is the budget. I'm going to call that up because I'm still sharing my screen. Where is it? Here it is. So I will update. I'm halfway through updating the 2024 pro forma that will go out with the board pack tomorrow, but that's really more perfunctory than the budget. So these things here that I highlighted in this peach color, the changes from the previously distributed and approved budget in October now, and they were really fairly minor. It's really just I moved around some of the marketing numbers and tweaked them. So the website is less than what we had in there before, and I forget what I had for these, but I know that I changed them. And then legal expense and other professional services, we had been expecting to finish out the BEAD subrecipient capacity work this year, and some of that, and that has not happened, partly because of delays in BEAD and the fact that we were told to pause that work over a month ago. I guess I shouldn't say partly, but entirely because of those two things. And so now we're expecting to close out the remaining accounting work and the remaining legal work in next year. So updated the budget accordingly. So those were the only changes to the budget. I mean, the rest of it we've looked at before. And as we know, I think this is it's a decent indicative budget, but there's so much up in the air in terms of BEAD and when BEAD and the rules around BEAD and some of the other things that are just uncertain right now, that I think this is fine for planning purposes. And as we get into it, we will talk about what we actually do. And if it's a major dramatic change, then we may vote an update to the budget. But There's nothing preventing that. The statute requires that we publish a budget. It doesn't say anything that we're not allowed to change the budget. Nancy.
I have just a couple of questions. Have you been able to get more clarity about when we should go after the financing?
I think that it's somewhat more clear in my head now. I think that the answer that we did get clarity on is that the earliest date for reimbursable expenses under BEAD is the date of the application, the submission of the full application, which is going to be April, May. And so I think that what we should do is I'm going to continue to refine the build plans and figure out as best I can what's my recommendation of what we should build in what order when. Present that and what it's going to cost, present that to you guys, we talk about it, and then once we've agreed, okay, this is what we're going to do, and here's the exact amount of financing, I shouldn't say exact, but here's the amount of anticipated financing that we need, then we will lock that down and go and identify potential options for that, and then bring them back for your consideration, then eventually the governing board. So
Okay.
Long story short, that's top priority to happen in Q1.
Okay. My next question is about under operating expenses, advertising and promotion. How is promotion different from marketing?
That's a great question. So it's kind of an arbitrary division in some ways, but essentially marketing is things like the retainer that we're paying for our marketing firm, the amount that we're paying for CrowdFiber. If we're doing things that are brand building, like investing in signs or things like that, or customer thank yous, that would be general marketing. And then anything related specifically to raising awareness about Maple Broadband and new customer acquisition, promotions, things like that, would go under advertising and promotions.
So it looks like because some of the lines have shifted, how would you summarize how our marketing expenses would be changing in 2025 from 2024 actuals?
Well, part of that is we're going to be later on the agenda, we're going to be going over the 2025 marketing plan. So
Right.
I think that'll be very well answered as part of that conversation. But just in general, if you look at it, we didn't spend a lot on promotion this year, and we spent a heck of a lot on marketing. And so some of that was, of course, the heavy pivot retainer we'd been paying, but then also the research. So the research that we paid London Middlebury to do, which is fantastic, and some of the headlines of which you'll be seeing shortly, and the full research report you'll be seeing in a couple of days, you'll be very impressed. But that's why we've had a lot of money in the marketing bucket this year, because we haven't really done a lot of promotions. And part of the reason we haven't done a lot of promotions is we didn't know what sort of messaging, and I didn't want to be spending a lot of money on putting a message out there if we weren't sure if the right message would hit. So this year has been about investing in getting the right marketing firm, doing the homework to figure out how we should be talking to people. And then next year, and this is actually a good lead in because it's one of the things that we talked about that we wanted to highlight, next year is actually a pretty heavy promotional budget because we want to be figuring out what channels and what approaches actually work in order to refine that. So if this was the year of understanding how to talk to our customers, next year is the year of figuring out what are the best ways to reach our customers cost effectively. And Ashley Kelly, feel free to jump in here because we are talking about marketing now. But we will get to this when we get to the presentation later. Does that help, Nancy?
And I just sort of a related question. The website expense of $10,000 in 2025, is that an expense? I know that London Middlebury has been thinking thoroughly about our website and changes to it. Are those funds that we would be paying to them to work on our website?
Yes, plus a little more. So the last meeting we voted to approve their RFP for the website redesign. Were you here for that meeting, Nancy? Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why I don't remember that, but
yeah.
Anyway.
So that is included in there because their proposal was $8,775, and then there's a couple of other hosting fees and.
Okay. I got it.
Yeah.
All righty, great. Thanks.
Okay, Jeff.
So I have it's sort of a technical budget question. In the version I received, when I open it, under both whole rentals and benefits, there's a formula in place and it's driving budget numbers to 11,000,008 and 10,525,000. So I don't know. I don't have what's on the screen, does not match what I received. What I had some like glitch in it because the ending cash is negative $21,929,000. So I came into this meeting with a couple of questions.
What's Ellie smoking?
What could you possibly be wondering about?
Yeah, right.
So
Still deficit spending, Jeff.
at a minimum, I'm trying to be a little lighthearted about this, but if you could recirculate that, Ellie, because I don't have what's on the screen now.
I absolutely will do. I have no idea how that happened. It might have been a computer
Yeah,
gremlin.
and so column C in both of those is there's a little formula for those two items that I mentioned that's tying to the 2024 pro forma page on another cell, and somehow that's driving it wild. At least I don't, did anybody else open it? Did anybody else have that experience? No. Huh.
I mean,
Okay.
I didn't have that experience, Jeff, but I don't think I looked at it as closely as you have, so.
Well, I'll recirculate it. And Jeff, if it happens again, just pop me a mail, and
Okay.
maybe I'll look into it further and let me know what are the cells that are causing you problems.
Okay. Thank you.
And sorry about that. I hope I didn't give you a heart attack.
No, I figured there was an error here.
Yeah. Okay.
That's why he's been pacing.
Yeah, that's why he's been pacing. All right. Anything else on the budget? Okay.
No.
All right. So I'm going to move on. Next thing is the overbuild public-facing guideline, and then I think D and E are
Actually,
going to be
I'm sorry, before
fairly
we
quick.
leave the budget,
Yeah.
which parts of this are going to be going to the governing board next week?
The 2025 budget and the 2024 pro forma.
Okay.
And
But just a reminder, I have requested, but maybe I'm the only person who would want to call it 2024 actuals or projected actuals.
Yeah, I think
But-
that's what we call it. That's what we call it in the top. I just haven't updated the tab.
Okay.
we're also submitting the annual report for approval.
Yep, there'll be a nice board pack that goes out tomorrow. It'll have these things as well as some information about the marketing plan for pre-reading. Okay, so overbuild public-facing guideline. Steve.
Yes, ma'am. So this has gone through quite a few changes. And we're not calling that, but I kind of, just to keep continuity there, I did put the term overbuild public-facing guideline, but basically what it's intended to do is capture what we're committing to as our organization ages in future years. So the first paragraph essentially recaps our obligation that the commitment we made to ensure that every address in our CUD has access to broadband internet service. And it's of some consequence because the money that we have used to date, the ARPA money that we've used to date to do all the construction we've done, pretty much all of it, came from that grant. And so there could be dire consequences if we didn't fulfill that obligation. And I guess from my perspective, the sooner we can do it, the better, because then we don't need to worry about being on the hook about something. But regardless, that first paragraph here is intended to capture that obligation to make sure we don't lose sight of it. And then the second paragraph, Ellie and I went back and forth. I don't think it's perfect, but I think this is a proposed language that we've got out there. And again, it's subject to your folks' review and approval. My intent would be, if you can approve it, and if we want to tweak it, we can do it all live if there's an interest, and then present it to the governing board next week. And then we've got that public-facing guideline we can post somewhere on our website. So the tricky part here, which is one of the hardest things to do, is to basically, among us that are on the executive committee, when we finish delivering fiber to under our Act 71 construction grant conditions, there will be some subscribers. For example, most everyone in Virgins, they won't have fiber. They will be continuing to receive fiber or broadband service via coaxial cable, which has been out there and embedded in the infrastructure for years. And Ellie raised a good point, which is that, and this is those of you who kind of keep an eye on technical matters know that the demand for increasing bandwidth seems to not be letting up at any time. It kind of tracks what's referred to in the industry as Moore's law, which is that there's almost an exponential increase in speeds and density of gear on circuit chips. And also, I think it's reasonable to assume that as we become more mature in the service we're delivering in our society, there's going to be a need for higher and higher levels of speed, at which point coaxial cable is going to fall short because it's got a top end. Whereas, as I've said many times before, fiber is kind of like plumbing. You can put whatever you want to in the plumbing, and you can deliver huge speeds. We were doing, I won't trouble you, but there's some technologies like dense wave division multiplexing, DWDM, which can just deliver a huge amount of overhead if needed. So we need to be doing our communities a service by giving them access to our to fiber, whereas and kind of not focus too much on the coax. So the language there is kind of a little cumbersome, perhaps, but I think our intent is to make sure that every member in our towns, in Maple Broadband towns, has access to at least 100 megabits download and 100 megabits upload. And this is something I gave you when we were going through this before. We don't use the word coaxial in that policy, but basically what you can see is if you're looking at coaxial broadband, it's not that good, and upload's not that good at all. And so what we want to make sure that our communities all have kind of a no top end for the capacity that they can leverage if and when it's needed. I would love to entertain some questions. Or maybe you're okay with it. Maybe if you want, let's do this. Nancy, let me make a motion and we'll second it, and then we can have some discussion about it. So I'll make a motion that we adopt these construction priorities as shown on the screen. Is there a second? We have a second from Shannon. Thank you. So I'm going to close this so I can see you guys. Yes, Nancy.
Well, I absolutely support what you and Ellie have worked on here. I was, when I read it, I thought, fine. At the same time, I thought, so what will we do if somebody calls us up and says, what about me? What about me? The big guys are screwing me, and I have terrible, I have terrible customer service, and I can get a bunch of my neighbors agreeing that we would love to have you serve us, so what is your I'm just wondering, what is your thinking about what we'll do when and if that happens?
Yeah, good point. We did in an earlier document refer to, I think what I described as the Goodwill program, but regardless,
Right.
It was intended to address those, what I'll call one-off type issues. Mm-hmm. And my intent here was that seemed to be a little narrower focused matter. And I do think that we need to be prepared with that. I guess we could take this, perhaps we can either react when we finally receive such a query and then polish off that document. I'd be a little less inclined to want to include it in this document because this is really more kind of global. It's not for Tom, Dick, and Harry. It's really about, everyone in our community. So we can approach that any way that you folks want. I think I'd discourage the idea of including that quote unquote goodwill program in this document. But if, we can keep it alive and continue to talk it through until we're kind of ready to respond to it. Or we can just wait until somebody kicks and screams, and then it shouldn't take us too long to get it wrapped up.
Well, I know I don't have a vote here, but my suggestion would be to leave it, to be silent on it for now, because the first thing we need to do is what this policy says. And if someone starts kicking and screaming before we finish building out to the areas that don't have fiber available from anyone, I think we'd have good reason to push back and say, this is what we're doing right now. And
Right.
so I mean, we can put this on the parking lot if you want, but I kind of feel like this is a conversation we should be having in a year and a half and not something we should be having now.
Okay. Makes sense.
Shannon.
I would agree with that as one of those people who would
He's
be
getting
likely
ready to kick and scream.
to kick and scream. No, but I mean, when all of this started, I knew full well that, there was never going to be a build in my particular neighborhood with ARPA funding, and that it would be years before, so I don't know if I'm unusual in that I was thinking that way, but I don't see it as a big issue. I think once you talk through that issue with people, it's like, oh yeah, you're on the list, but it's going to be a while because there are ties to strings to some of those other funding sources.
yeah.
So I think that the document that you have presented is about as good as it's going to get for covering both sides of that issue.
Yeah, the one thing that occurred to me as you were talking, Shannon, is that we can kind of treat this as a living document.
Mm-hmm.
If we can all look at ourselves and say, yeah, this covers it pretty well, probably somebody's going to ask a question that didn't get answered by that document, and we'll just have to go in and refine it a little bit if need be.
And that's the beauty of these types of things, is that they evolve as the situations change.
Yeah, right. Any other thoughts?
I have a couple of questions. One, or not questions, comments. One, I appreciate, I think it does track how we concluded our conversation about this at the last meeting. So it seems consistent to me. It seems thoughtful. I think the provided our financial viability is maintained language gives us all the room we need to consider any request, because within that standard, we have reason to move ahead or to say no. So I'm very pleased with this. I don't understand if this is a policy or sort of what this is. You need not walk me through that, but I don't know where this fits in the realm of stuff. One, and two, and perhaps even for our marketing folks, it's really a grammatical question. I'm just wondering about how this is written, sort of personally, like our obligations, our Act 71 construction grant versus its. I just don't know what's appropriate given the nature of the entity and the audience.
I like that. I think you got a really good point, Jeff, and I think that there is the concept that I think we're voting on today, and then how it's executed or how it's expressed out to our community. I think part of what I was most concerned about was trying to find some way to express it that people would understand it and they wouldn't be scratching their head and going, what do they mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think if we have a newsletter out there, every month we issue a newsletter. When the time comes, we can just ask our folks at our marketing agency to make it a little bit more approachable, maybe expand on it in some way to help people understand what the issue is. So I agree, Jeff. I think there's the concept, but then there's also the execution. I think the execution could be problematic without some help from London Middlebury.
So you're saying, I think, that you wouldn't consider it a policy that's not in policy language at this point, but it's just for us to come to a consensus as an executive committee about what we're about related to our construction priorities. I think that's what you're saying.
Right now, this was just, essentially the idea is we just delete that. And this is our construction priorities. That's my pitch. And I think part of this was, like I said in earlier emails to you, is overbuild. People are not necessarily going to get that. It's not going to have much meaning to them. But ultimately, I think this is our priorities, and and I wouldn't hang a word like policy after it or something like that. It's really, as an organization, you could almost say it is our guiding principles or something like that. But I don't know. We could think about that. But I guess I'd be open to any suggestion for retitling this.
But I mean, at this point, you're not assuming it'll go onto our website in this form.
Correct. Yeah, I think this is an internal document.
So in that case, all the better. But what you had written in the parking lot, Ellie, was that it was a public-facing guideline. So I guess it's up to you as how to handle it. I mean, I'd be open to whatever you want to do.
Well, I think if we can agree what we want, then the next step would be to produce something which is public-facing. So we keep it on the parking lot, and that's the next step. So the first thing is, let's agree that this is the strategy, the priority of the organization. And then the second thing is we talk about how we want to communicate it, which is something that you can obviously delegate to me, and we'll keep it on the parking lot until we have a way to talk about it publicly.
I'll take that as a friendly amendment. I think it's a great idea, and I think, would that be okay with you, Shannon? Yeah, okay. So the motion then is to approve this in principle, with refinement to be made by our marketing agency at the appropriate time. Further discussion? Okay, all in favor of the construction policy as currently written, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Great. Thank you, everyone. So I'm going to try and move to the next things pretty quickly because London Middlebury has a lot of slides to present to you guys and before our hard stop at 5. So there's two things I wanted to raise. One is, as was mentioned earlier, in the month of January, I'm going to be in South Africa. So this time is going to be well into my evening. So I wanted to talk about when we might reschedule executive committee meetings for the month of January. So I guess that's the first. And then the second thing is, from the month of January, there is a requirement. So as you guys recall, the new open meeting law requires that public entities have all bodies that are not advisory, which means the governing board as well as the executive committee, because we make decisions here, needs to have an in-person option available, and CUDs were exempted from this requirement until January 1st, but as of January 1st, we are no longer exempted. So we're going to have a member of the executive committee or the executive director show up in person physically at some physical location as from January. So obviously that can't be me in January. That's going to have to be someone else. I think Adam has offered to host this at ACRPC, and I can be the one when I'm here, but I'm not here in January. So I want to discuss both these things together to figure out, can we move these to, for example, Thursday morning at 8 o'clock, and on which weeks would we do that, and who's going to be the one to show up in person at ACRPC?
So I don't recall reading in that open meeting law the need for a member of Maple Broadband being physically on site. Is that what it says?
Oh, it's there. It's there.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm happy to to fill in. I also think that regarding what we do in terms of executive committee meetings in January, it's kind of a quiet period right now. I think we've gone a couple weeks at a time without meetings, and we're not making decisions. We don't seem to be voting on capital matters. So perhaps we can find a spot somewhere in the middle of January where we hold one executive committee meeting plus the governing board meeting, of course. That would be my proposal there. And you said, what do you say, Thursday morning at 8?
Well, that's a suggestion because we usually do these on Thursdays, but in the interest of time, rather than trying to sit here and schedule, if Thursday morning at 8 o'clock does not work for anyone or does not work for one person, then what I'll do is I'll send out a doodle poll to figure out I'll give some dates and times that'll work for my time zone, and we can proceed that way. And I like your suggestion, Steve, to have one meeting in, say, mid to late January, and I'll cancel the other ones.
Yep, I'm looking at my January, and we do. Ellie, you and I probably on Thursdays, we don't. Normally it would be Thursday morning. We'd be meeting with Syracuse Utilities and WCVT, and this would be right on top of that. And I guess we'll have to work around that. But if we assume that any meetings that we have with we'll call them vendors, contractors, we can do those ad hoc perhaps. And then on my calendar, if it weren't for that, my calendar is pretty open for 8 o'clock on the, what would it be? The middle would be like the 16th of January maybe, or something like that, or the 23rd.
So we have a governing board meeting on the 14th, right?
On the 14th, yeah.
Good point, Nancy. So maybe we don't want to do it we don't want to have it just an executive committee 2 days later. So if we had only one, maybe we do it on the 23rd.
23rd at 8 to 9:30.
How do you feel about that, everyone?
Okay for me.
Fine with me, although I may have to leave at 9.
Okay. All right, I'll move that one. Thank you.
And yeah.
And Steve, you're gonna run the governing board meeting and.
Yeah.
He runs those anyways. I'll just make sure to brief. I'm sorry, Steve. I cut you off.
Yeah, you and I said the same thing. I was trying to get Ellie to run the governing board meeting, but the bylaws don't permit that. So
The statute, the law doesn't permit that. That's the problem.
Okay.
But it's fine.
Yep.
As you know, I did them before Ellie came along, so, and I do the same thing. I'll handle, and Ellie, you're thinking you'll be able to attend the one that we have in the executive committee meeting in the middle of January, right?
Well, that's the whole point of moving it to the morning, so that I can. Yeah.
Great.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, parking lot, there were a number of changes to the parking lot, if you guys look at your agenda, but I don't think there's anything here which is important enough to call out and discuss. But does anyone want to raise anything from the parking lot? If not, we can move on. So, Ashley and Kelly, you guys, go ahead, Steve.
Let's do the fun stuff.
Yeah, let's do the fun stuff. Now, the fun thing is going to be to see how we fit all of this into 30 minutes.
Everyone ready for a wild ride?
Get ready to talk fast.
Ellie, before we get started, just the email that we were chatting about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how you want to address that.
Yeah. So, we've been working on a deck together. Ashley put together a great deck, and I had a couple of comments on our call earlier today. So it starts off with some of the summary of the market research, and as I said, you'll be getting a much more detailed version of this in the next couple of days in your emails to read at your leisure. But I think that after that, when we start talking about our marketing plans and strategies and recommendations, it would be a good idea to go into executive session so that we don't have competitors hearing the details. So,
Ellie, you were at the Vacuda meeting. You had mentioned some part of what we're doing with London Middlebury and sharing it with the Vacuda. What part of that would you be wanting to share?
The research.
Okay.
Not our plan, but the research, because people in Addison County are not exactly the same as people in other parts of the state, but I think some of the findings are probably shared, and just understanding the questions that were asked could be useful for others.
Okay.
Okay,
Wonderful.
so go
Thanks,
ahead,
everyone.
and then before we get to the recommendations, we'll turn it over to Steve to do the executive session bits.
So are we going to then adjourn immediately after this presentation so we don't need to reconvene?
I don't think we're allowed to do that.
Adam does that, but okay.
Does he? Well, if Adam does it, then let's do it. Let's adjourn the meeting and then have another meeting and go into executive session.
Shannon, does that ring true?
You can't make any actions during your executive session, but if you're going to act on those recommendations afterward, then you have to reconvene.
Yeah. So I guess
So
that's
we
the
need
question. Like,
to-
yeah. You may. I mean, it depends, right? Because there's some things here that we wish to recommend and basically would like your blessing on. I mean, the high level budgetary part is already up for governing board debate, so it's really, do we agree with this? So, and it's within the purview of the executive committee to decide. I don't think the governing board is going to decide differently than the executive committee, so you could decide just to get the preview now, get the feedback, give whatever feedback you want, and then the decision will be made formally on Tuesday. Or
Right.
you could say, all right, let's just go into executive session and then come out and adopt the plan, because I think you'll love it. Totally up to you how you want to proceed.
Well, we won't know until we see it, right? So,
Yeah. So how about you don't adjourn, and then we have the flexibility to decide.
okay.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ellie, and thanks everyone for allowing us to be here and for this for trusting us with this process. And it's really been so enjoyable working with Ellie. Again, we have a lot of information to share with you, and I want to be sure we respect that 5 o'clock hard stop. So I'll be moving quickly, but please ask questions as they occur. To give a little bit of context before I start sharing my screen, this is a slide deck to walk through the key imperative research findings and the strategy and campaign concepts. But the marketing plan itself is a 100+ page document that is just really tactical. It has the full personas, it has the full campaigns, and there's also an accompanying 55-page research report. So all of that somehow has, we're going to cover the most important aspects of all of that in the next 26 minutes. So let me share my screen.
You guys are a bunch of geeks, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why we love Ellie so much.
Yeah. So as mentioned, the research report is nearly done. You'll be getting that shortly, and then the marketing plan, the 100-page one, we're still working through. And as you'll see here, some of the things we're talking about are things that we wish to do, but we need to get into the details before we have something finalized.
So if this is proprietary and confidential, why doesn't it meet the standard right now to go into executive session?
Well, I think we could. The first couple of slides are on the results of the research, which are probably not terribly confidential, and interested members of the public could stand to hear.
Fair enough. I defer to you.
Right. Can everyone see my screen where it says draft? Okay,
Mm.
wonderful. So that's the important thing here. This is a draft of the strategy and implementation roadmap that we're still working to finalize with Ellie, feeling like it's in a really strong place as we close out the year and this part of the project. So as Ellie said, we're going to start by diving into the key research findings. These are in 3 main areas. So I want to walk through our current brand perception findings that reveal both strengths and definitely areas for improvement. So starting with the strengths, our research shows that Maple Broadband has established definitely strong community trust and clear alignment with Addison County and Vermont values. And this was evidenced by familiarity metrics. If you take a look at the chart here and combine the very familiar and the familiar, 66% of the respondents of survey, stakeholder interviews, and customer interviews, of course, were either very familiar or familiar with the brand. And then 81% view the nonprofit status either very positively or positively. So this is, I hope this is just confirmation for everyone that the foundation that this foundational element is definitely crucial for our future growth, and we're in a good place there.
What was the
However,
number of respondents?
the number of survey respondents was 299.
Okay.
And then, so we have had a total of about 325 conversations, and all of that methodology is included in the research report. Thanks, Nancy.
Yep.
So we did identify some key areas that need attention. And first, while we're definitely, Maple Broadband is perceived as the premium provider, we need to better articulate the value proposition as a community-owned entity. Currently, there's a disconnect between—
Your slide hasn't moved, by the way. We're still on the brand perception with the
That's
how
right.
familiar are you?
That's where we're supposed to be.
That's right.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, so the disconnect of having premium pricing, but also the ability to communicate the value and reasoning behind it. So right now, people are like, "You're expensive because you're local," and that's it. So understanding what the basis of that pricing is and what that investment in the community looks like. And then another significant challenge is that confusion between Maple Broadband's identity and the WCVT partnership. And I see nodding on the screen, so this is not new, but it creates definitely some market confusion, and that does need to be addressed through clear communication and brand architecture. So we have a recommendation on that front as well. Like I said, we're going through the key findings, and we'll build on each of these as we get further into the deck. But looking at the opportunities, the bullets here, the 3 areas for improvement are definitely expanding the local visibility through targeted community engagement and educational and volunteer initiatives, creating stronger messaging that connects the premium pricing to tangible community benefits and infrastructure improvement, and then developing that clearer brand architecture that leverages the WCVT credibility while still maintaining your distinct identity and not having customers be really confused who they're talking to or who they're supposed to be talking to. So lots of the data is definitely suggesting you have strong mission alignment and awareness, and we just need to transition from being perceived as I say in quotes, just a local utility provider to a more engaged community partner that has technology and service that can compete with the private national providers. Feel like I'm talking so fast. So if anyone really needs me to slow down, please give me the hand signal. The next key area was customer journey. So looking at data from our customer experience analysis, we did identify a critical contrast between the superior technical delivery of quality to technical delivery quality and then the installation process. So the numbers here reveal that 8 out of the 9 customer interviews experienced pretty significant installation frustrations and challenges. And that is a significant pain point that demands our immediate attention. Those challenges were communication challenges, communication gaps, wait times, how attentive we were to them compared to competitors. So while everyone is really happy once they get their install scheduled and their service up and running, it is very, very rocky start for many folks. And that, like I said, or like I mentioned, the positive aspects, once customers get through that initial hurdle, we see really strong satisfaction with the actual service. 95% of your current customers, 95% of survey respondents who were current customers would recommend Maple Broadband, and 96% report being really satisfied or very satisfied with the service. And you'll see the infographic on the bottom says 79%. That is the very satisfied. So 79% are very satisfied. And when we combine satisfied with very satisfied, we get 96%. So wonderful job. Hats off to everyone for really delivering what you're promising to the community. So just recapping the 3 critical areas on the customer journey that we need to address: installation timeline issues. That gap between sign up and installation isn't just an inconvenience for your customers, you're actively losing committed customers. One of the anecdotes that we heard from a not Maple Broadband customer is that they had signed up, they had committed, it was radio silent as to when they were going to actually get their service. They had reached out many, many times. And then unfortunately, a competitor knocked on their door and said, we can get you live tomorrow. And fiber was more important than going with Maple Broadband for them, especially when they didn't feel like there was much attention being paid to them. So I know there are a lot of operational aspects there that marketing can't necessarily control, but the data definitely shows that this is a critical area needing attention. Those communication gaps, like I mentioned, during that already challenging installation period, and it is important to note that people are excited about getting your service, which is why they're so frustrated with how quiet it is and how long it takes sometimes. We're compounding that problem with insufficient communication. So that's something that since we've joined Maple Broadband on the marketing side, we've been working with Ellie and with WCVT to have automated emails. And so that there's more communication happening. But again, this focus of making sure customers aren't left in the dark about their installation status, timelines, next steps. There's a lot of expectation setting that we can do at the beginning, even with the initial sign up and inquiry. Yeah, Steve.
Actually, I don't want to cut too much into your time, but I also know that we've approached Ellie about these exact concerns. And I know, Ellie, you've worked with CrowdFiber and WCVT regarding expanding the types and trigger event for customer notifications. So I guess I'm wondering, Ellie, if you feel like that's a good first step, but there's a lot more that needs to be done that we don't have the tools to do?
Yes. And more on this later in the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. And then the other thing that I don't know if it's on your radar, but there was this perception of system fragmentation, the current setup with multiple service portals, sometimes Maple Broadband branded, sometimes SmartPay branded, sometimes a WCVT person's calling you, sometimes often a WCVT person, always a WCVT person is coming to the home. It's just adding additional confusion to an already complex process. So looking for opportunities to strengthen the brand. And again, expectation setting, even if it is that you'll be getting an invite to this portal that has none of our branding anywhere, but we promise it's for us and it's a safe and secure place for you to pay your bills. So the key insight here is that while the technical service quality is strong, we do need to significantly improve the journey to getting that service installed. And the great thing is they are just early stage challenges, and we don't have a whole customer journey that we need to remedy. It is this very one concentrated area for the most part. And then I'll go just really quickly flashing this up. This is just to further paint the picture of pain points throughout the customer journey. All but one customer that we interviewed had basically each of these pain points in the 4 main areas of service understanding, and installation timeline, communication issues, and then system and process complexity. There is a lack of digestibility and what it takes to get fiber to one's home to make it happen, the benefits of fiber itself, and then, like I mentioned, the portals. But it was nice that we were really able to identify these 4 key areas of customer pain points. I also just wanted to share a couple of customer interview quotes. So the biggest takeaway here, and I'll let you read while I talk, is that it really feels like for the customer, it's their responsibility to make fiber happen. They have to advocate for themselves. They have to keep calling. They have to say, when is my appointment? What do I need to make it happen? And you'll see here, there's the quote about not knowing that they had to source the string for pulling the fiber. There's also unclear messaging about whose responsibility it is to especially when it comes to buried service, to have the conduit to pull the fiber, and to even to like hire flaggers. Some folks thought that it was their responsibility to hire flaggers, and that kind of tripped things up as well. So expectation setting is really the name of the game here. Right, the last section in the key research findings is the competitive analysis. This reveals both market opportunities and pricing challenges that we have to address strategically. Again, all of these will be much bigger with additional context in the research reports. I'm sorry to tease you with some of this, this fun data, but the market sentiment data tells an interesting story that while about 45% of potential customers express negative sentiment about their current service, only about half of those are likely to switch providers in the next 6 months. So we're facing some hurdles in capturing that opportunity, and want to kind of break it down into these 3 key findings of market position and growth potential. We're definitely ideally positioned to serve the growing remote worker segment and rural areas. And then it was great to see, I think, is it this one? The second one, yes, 94.3% of customers would choose Babel Broadband over national providers at equal pricing. But we know that that's not what's happening right now. So we just have to have that consideration that we are the preferred brand, but pricing is very important to folks. And then the status as a community governed organization does resonate strongly with 78% viewing it positively. However, the pricing challenges, the $149 installation fee and higher pricing structure is definitely creating barriers to entry. Unlike competitors, we don't offer promotional rates or price locks. And so the psychological preference towards those is not necessarily in our favor right now. And then it's particularly impacting our competitiveness, like I said, against aggressive promotional offerings, the ones that are maybe half of our cost for the first year, and then they do go up significantly, but everyone's, the apples to apples that they're comparing is how much are they paying today. And if we look at how much it costs for them to install, especially if their house is a bit further, and the price per month, they're not looking at it over a longer period of time, they're looking at that first bill. So again, the data is definitely suggesting we can address some of these pricing barriers while maintaining the community focused approach. And we do want to do our best to capture that significant portion of dissatisfied customers in our market.
Okay, so I think that's it for the research, is that right?
I have 2 more slides. I'm not going to go into detail here. But the audience personas, there's 4 key customer segments that we identified, and you can read more about this in the report. The key thing to note here is that these are not your only audience. These are just essentially the lowest hanging fruit. They represent the most immediate opportunities, as you see the folks on the screen. And then strategic imperatives based on the research are the building trust through transparency, barrier removal, closing those customer experience gaps, and I won't talk to the last thing until we go into executive session.
Okay, Steve, you want to do the honors?
Sure. I move to find that premature general public knowledge regarding Maple Broadband's business strategy would clearly place us at a substantial disadvantage because it risks disclosure of our activities if they were to be communicated to the public. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. I move that we enter into executive session to discuss business strategy under Title I, Section 313, subsection A of the Vermont statutes. Is there a second?
Second.
And okay, great. Thank you. I guess we're in executive session, Ellie.